Hello, everybody. This is Nick Totiro, Professor of Information Technologies, Computer Science, Lakeland Community College. And in this video, let's talk about errors, more importantly, errors handling. Now, by this point in the semester, you should all be very familiar with errors. It's part of the process. It's part of the programming process. We all create some kind of errors. But now we're going to kind of almost formalize them. I know I probably talked about them in other videos or in, what do you call it, in lectures, but let's really formalize them. Generally speaking, there are three types of errors. The first one is what we call a syntax error. Sometimes you may hear it called a compiler error. In Python, since Python is not a compiler-based language, it's an interpreter language, we're just going to call it a syntax error. And fundamentally, what a syntax error is, you made a typo. You used the wrong command. Something, the grammar was wrong. The structure that you did was wrong. And again, we all do this. If you've seen any of my videos, you see that I often mistype things and stuff like that. Now, the thing with syntax errors is they're very easy to discover because when you, again, Python is not a compiler-based language, but when you compile the language or when you run the program, it just will not work. It spits out an error and it tells you specifically you did something wrong. Now, let's go up to my computer and let's do a really quick look at a syntax error. I'm using Replit. I'm going to use a real simple IDE here. And I'm at a Python shell. And let's say, for example, I want to say print hello world. I think we're all familiar with print hello world. And I run it and it kicks back print hello world. What if I have a typo? What if I just spelled the word print, as you see me do many, many times? I say PRNT, hello world. Then it kicks back and it says, you did something wrong. And even a lot of times it'll tell you what you did wrong. PRNT is not defined. Did you mean print? Let's take a look at an old friend here. Now, if you go back to the videos beginning of the semester, one of our old friends was a program I wrote and a video on called When You Eat Your Smarties, right? Let's just bring that back real quickly. So if I look at the main code here and I go to run this, and if you want to rewatch that video, you can, you don't have to. But if I want to run this program and I say, let me get out of here, and I say Python main.py redirect file. Don't worry about these commands. Again, they were covered in previous videos, but if I run this program, there it runs. Now, if I make a typo in here, somewhere in here, I'm going to make a typo. And let's see, right here, line 18, instead of spelling else if or elif, I'm going to have a typo, elf. All right. If I go and I run this program again, it just says, whoa, wait a second here. You've done something wrong. You have a typo. It happens to be, it's telling me it's at line 18. This doesn't make sense to the interpreter. You need to fix it. All right. And again, syntax errors happen all the time. They're very easy to clean up. Again, at this point in the semester, you should all be familiar with this particular error. It's called a syntax error. It's a grammar error. It could be a spelling error, whatever. So let me go in there and fix it. All right. And just to make sure everything is cool, I'll run it. And lo and behold, everything runs. The other type of error you might come across is a logic error. You did something wrong in your logic. What you were thinking doesn't really produce the results that you want. The syntax errors are gone away, but you are expecting a certain result and you don't get that result. Again, at this point in the semester, actually, within 20 minutes of writing your first code, you've run into a logic error. That's normal. You're expecting something and you don't get it. Now, those often are the hardest ones to find. You're convinced your logic works and it doesn't work and something's going wrong. If we take a look at, let's take a look at box 10 here. Let's look at this data right here, this box 10 data. And let's remember the number 551, right? This data is correct. Now let me go in there and make a logic error. I'm going to make a logic error. And in this logic error, I'm going to remove this line right here. I'm going to, as I'm writing this program, I'm going to forget to put the brown Smarties into this logic, right? Happens all the time, especially when you're dealing with 10 different flavors or whatever, 10 different, you may forget something. Now let's run this. Let's run this code, clear it up. And remember, the box 10 should be 551 and it's 525. Now here's the problem, and this is why they're so insidious. How do I know this is not the correct value, right? I'm going to look at this and look at that 525. Okay, it looks cool to me. But then somebody may look over my shoulder. This might be part of a beta test. Somebody's going to look in. They're going to put very specific values in here. They're going to put test data in here. And when they put the test data in here, let's say they put the test data in here and they're expecting 551 and they don't see it. They now know there's a logic error. Logic errors are often discovered with test data. That's why we go through an alpha test and a beta test. We're trying to find these problems. So as maybe an alpha tester in this particular case, I'm looking, well, oh, look here. How come in every single box, we run test data, I'm expecting 551, I'm expecting some other values, and I have that documented. But in every single box, there's no brown Smarties. From my test data, I should know there's brown Smarties in there. So guess what? I've discovered the logic error. I'm not taking into consideration the brown Smarties. It's not a programming error. This thing ran just fine. It is I, the programmer, didn't take into consideration a certain task, a certain function, whatever, and then the test data proves me wrong. So I'm going to go back into this and I'm going to say, all right, so all I'm doing here is I'm taking into consideration, I'm fixing my logic, right? I'm saying I didn't count the brown Smarties. That was discovered in the alpha test. That was discovered in test data. So I go back to, and we run this, and there's my 551. Oh, my test data matches. I'm expecting in box 10, 14 brown Smarties. I'm getting a total count of 551 seconds. In box 9, I'm expecting 9 brown Smarties. I'm getting my test value of 538. You can see where this is going. So these were the first two types of error. Go back to here. First error, syntax error. Very common, typos, grammar is wrong, how you wrote or how the programmer wrote the code wrong. Those are easily discovered. If it's a compiler-based language, it just won't compile. If it's an interpreter-based language like Python, it's going to hit that and say, you're wrong, you need to fix it. Most of the time, they're going to tell you very specific lines to go to. Then we have logic errors. Logic errors are those ones that you may have to hunt down. It looks like it's running, but you're not getting the results that you want. We've often discovered those with test data to make sure that our logic is working. The third type of error is what is referred to as a runtime error, or sometimes called an exception. We're not going to cover it in this video. We're going to cover it in the next video. A runtime error means your syntax is obviously fine, so it's not a syntax error. Your logic appears to be working, but maybe something goes wrong with the data. As you're reading the data, it triggers an event that your program can't handle. Logic is correct, but your program can't handle it. For example, the one that we'll see this in demonstrations, the one that's very common is dividing by 0. You cannot divide by 0. So let's say you're gathering information and at some point you're asking a user a particular question and you're asking for a value and they provide 0, and that's causing the program to divide by 0. That's not going to work. That's called a runtime error or an exception error. Again, that's a deeper subject. And now we're at the point in the semester that we can specifically talk about that subject. So syntax error, very common. Logic error, very common, hard to discover. Runtime errors, we got to take those all into considerations. So that being said, let's go learn something.